So here on habit item, we added this at click.alt equals emit delete item. So when you click holding alt, it's going to emit a delete item event. And habit items are inside of habit groups. You can see here inside of habit group, we loop through our habits and make a habit item for each one. And that's where that delete item event is listened for. We emit it from a habit item and we listen for it inside of habit group. And it calls a delete item method, which is this method here, that deletes the item from the habits array. But I don't like that we are modifying the habits array within habit group. I think it would be nice if we centralized all of the logic that modifies our list of habits inside of Dopamine Box. So habit group is inside of Dopamine Box. And because this is sort of the root level of our application, I think it should do all the modifications to the habits array so that we keep all that logic in one place. And we already have reset all and handle habit added here. So I think we should have a delete item method here as well. But if we go back to habit group, this is where we're listening for delete item. But we want to start listening for it. Instead of listening for it here, we want to listen for it inside of Dopamine Box because that's where the method's going to be. So I'll comment that out. So how, though, are we going to get this delete item event from habit item up to Dopamine Box? Well, that's the way events work in JavaScript, is they propagate all the way up through their parent tags. So we don't have to do anything special to make that work. We can actually just listen right here for delete item equals, and if we call the method delete item, and I'll put the actual implementation here with just console.log, this should delete something. So now if I try clicking with holding alt, it's going to emit the event, which will be listened for here inside of Dopamine Box. And we see that message logged out. Okay, but of course we need to actually hook that up. And if I go back to habit group, we still have our delete item method here, which we want to remove. Okay, because I don't want to do this manipulation here inside of habit group. But I think finishing this will be a good challenge for you. Okay, so I've pasted in a challenge prompt here. And the first two steps are things I've actually kind of done for you already. Remove the delete item method from habit group. So inside of habit group, I already commented that method out, and I commented out the event handler. We're not going to need those anymore. Add a new delete item method to Dopamine Box. I've already added that for you here, except the body is fake. It just logs this message. Now the last one's the important one. I want you to make any modifications necessary to the code so that deleting works. Okay, because right now, alt-clicking one of these doesn't actually delete, it just logs a message. So figure out how to make it actually work. I'm leaving this a little bit open-ended, and I want you to explore and try and figure it out. See how you would do it. If this was your project, what would you do? Keep in mind one big difference here is that in the previous way this was working, an index was being passed. As we loop through each of these, we get a reference to I, which is the index of these items, and we passed that to delete item, and that was how we removed the item. We found the item in the habits array by index and removed it. But over here, we don't have an index. When we listen for the delete item event, we're not in a loop, so we can't be listening for an index. So you'll have to come up with a way to identify the item so it can be deleted. There's a variety of ways you could do it. Give it a shot. If you find yourself doing something really complicated, changing tons of code, you're probably on the wrong track. But also, feel free to modify code in any of the files. Do whatever you need to make it work. Give it a try, and then I'll do my version of it. All right, here's how I'm going to solve this problem. The first thing is, inside of this delete item method, I'm thinking, okay, how do I delete this item? And then I think, wait, which item? How do I even know which item initiated this click? So we need to solve that. Before, we were passing in an index of the item, but we don't have an easy way to get the index here. So let's go to where this event is being emitted on habit item, and we know how to pass along some data along with a custom event. The second parameter to emit. We could pass some reference to the item here, but habit item only accepts a name and a done. Neither of those can be used to uniquely identify the item. For example, the name might be duplicated, so we can't really rely on that. But we do have an ID that we assign to all of our habits that uniquely identifies it, so maybe we can pass that in as well. So inside of habit group, that's where we use these habit items. And let's just pass in id equals habit.id. Now inside of habit item, we can make a prop for that, prop id. We'll use that here. We'll say id as the second parameter for emit. So now habit items know their own ID, and they can send that along when the delete item event happens. So I'll go back to Dopamine Box, and inside of delete item, I want to get access to that ID. And remember, that's going to come on the event object. So I'll put the event object as a parameter here, and I'll do console.log e.detail. So if you remember, any custom values that you pass along with an event come through on the event object's detail prop. So if I option click here, we should see an ID. There it is. Now we just have to use that ID to find the relevant item and remove it from the array. So we can change this to say const id to delete equals e.detail. And now we need to search through our array, find the ID of the one that we want to delete, and create a new array without that item in it. One easy way to do that is to use the built-in array.filter method. So that would allow us to say habits equals habits.filter. So we're reassigning habits with the result of habits.filter, which is going to return a new array with some items filtered out. And we want to filter out the item that has this ID. So filter takes a callback function. So we can say do, and then the parameter is going to be each item of the array in turn, so each habit. So I'll just use the letter H as a stand-in for that. And the body of this function should be a function that returns true or false depending on if it's an item we want to filter out. So we want to filter it out if it's id h.id equals id to delete. Let's see if this works. Add a couple items, option click. And I got that backwards. So we actually want to return false if the ID matches, and true otherwise. So the items where this function returns true will be kept in the array. The items where it returns false will be filtered out. So option click one of these. And now it's working nicely. Cool, so there's different ways you could do this, but I think this filter method makes it pretty easy. Now I'm just going to remove some of these comments, and I'll go into habit group where we left a couple of commented out things that we don't need anymore. So let's just delete those. And now we're all set. I think it's really nice that we have all of the array manipulation inside of Dopamine Box at this root level of our application.